Now comes the 1980s, and baby boomers are going into the industries and making enormous changes. They didn't care about the stability of society. They cared about changing their class. They resented their parents in many respects, and they weren't going to duplicate their experience. They went for it all, and they made a lot of money. Today, the median income for the average family of 4 is no different than in 1972. Today, we have more people going from middle class to lower middle class than ever before. It is quickly representing one of the largest groups of people, with giant migration efforts from New York City, from Chicago, Pittsburgh, to the Sun Belt, and to California, now exiting out of California. Competition for the jobs that remain are fierce. People between the age of 45 and 55 who are still far from retirement are finding it more difficult to get work. Why? Because they're overqualified and they've been overpaid. They expect too much. When they go to get a job, they're not looking to be paid minimum wage. They want to be paid something similar to what they've been making their whole life. But now an industry says, well, you know, if we were really honest, we didn't even need that job for all those years you had it. And it's true. All over America, industries of all types had enormous surpluses in labor, skilled and unskilled. But it didn't matter because we had the concept of spend. Now keep in mind, the people who were not spending themselves into debt were the children of the Depression. Your fathers and mothers and mine and our grandparents. They were conditioned to save and save and save. That was the message of Wall Street. That was the message of Madison Avenue. Be conservative. And they did. Now, ironically, they didn't get all caught up in the gross materialism. And as a result, today, the most stable economic force in America is our middle class, the older middle class. Do you have any idea how many baby boomers are going home to live with their parents, borrowing money for their kids' tuition, borrowing money for going back to school themselves, borrowing money for mortgage payment? It is the reality that today's baby boomers will end up having less at the end of this decade than their parents. And that's a remarkable phenomenon when you consider how much education and how many skills and how far we all went. And what made the difference? It was not the law of scarcity. There is no law of scarcity. It doesn't work. And this whole very perverse notion that if you make money, that makes someone else impoverished. That also isn't real. But we believed it was, and therefore we began to resent about the 1980s on. We resented wealth. We resented people who had wealth. We felt that the more wealth they have, the less wealth we have. It doesn't work that way. To the contrary, when you start implementing programs to punish the wealthy so that you spread the wealth out, supposedly, then where's the incentive for the entrepreneur to create industries or services that employ more people and provide more goods for society that needs it? It's not there. Ironically, we did the biggest mistake we could have. On a sociological level, we began to punish the affirmative mind, someone who wanted to do something for themselves. And partly this was because the middle class never generally exceeds its class structure, either philosophically, politically, economically, in education, or anything else. Its whole philosophy of how it should live and how everyone else should live is within these boundaries. Now, as long as you were not perceived as earning money or having money that you didn't really earn, then people said, all right. In other words, if a basketball star went out and made $1 million and won a championship and won it all, then the $1 million they felt they deserved, and the endorsements that came with us. No one said, you shouldn't have your money, Michael Jordan. But everybody got real incensed when people would make $70 million as head of a corporation when the corporation actually lost money. or they didn't see how could a person make that when it had nothing to do with the workers in their company. They were laying off workers and same time giving themselves money or making a profit. It grated on people. It was like an unearned profit. And in America, we don't like to see people make money that they don't earn. And especially if it seems disproportionate to everyone else who may allow them to earn it. So we ended up in a lot of crisis in who we should trust, what our ideals should be, and what we should have for ourselves. A lot of people developed almost a poverty mentality. They feared money. They didn't know what to do with it. They didn't know how much they needed. They didn't know what they were working for. Were they working because they wanted to earn more money to buy more things? Were they working because they wanted to have more money to have more freedom, to be what they wanted to be? Did they think they could buy themselves out of the class system and buy themselves into another class? And that's what we're going to focus on because it affects everyone here. It affects everyone watching. And you'll see as we unfold this how our belief systems that we've already talked about are keeping us within a certain mindset. Now, a lot of people out there today, probably 25 million, have finally got a hold on who they want to be, where they want to work, where they want to live, and what they want to do. And money is generally not the #1 priority. Having a happy life is. And if it means making more money and displacing that happy life, they're not going to make more money. You'll find the phenomena of people who will make enough money to serve their needs and then they stop making money. And that just irritates people to no end. To see people who, what are you doing? Well, I'm taking it easy. You know? It's 11 o'clock in the morning, I know, but I've made enough money. I made enough money, you know, and I'm taking this week off. I don't want to make any money this week. For people to say, gee whiz, I wished I was in your place, most people could be in that person's place if they knew how and if they knew what they wanted and are willing to work on it. But there's the other side. You see, look at New York as an example. Here we have an administration that has an enormous, this is not uncommon, this is true of most major cities, an administration that gets elected based upon buying votes. Quite simply, it buys votes by promising certain district leaders and politically connected people advantages for putting them in office. So they guarantee a certain block of votes. Next thing you know, you have patronage. And this patronage system has grown to where you have about about 245,000 employees, of which only 100,000 are necessary to get the work done. But we end up paying for all those people. Now, when people live in New York City and then you decide that, well, an apartment that used to buy, let's say 10 years ago, on the Upper West Side, a Classic 6 you could buy for about $100,000, or you could rent it for about $300 a month. Now you rent it for $3,000, or you buy it for $500,000. Not the middle class doing that. In fact, the only middle class that really benefited were ones who were here all along, and now they own these very valuable piece of properties that all of these baby boomers wanted. The baby boomers frequently mortgaged their parents' homes, or the parents gave it to them when they moved on to Florida. They sold these homes in the suburbs for about $200,000, used that as down payment, bought their apartments in the city, overpaid for them. I saw this phenomenon. I was there. I saw brownstones that were worth $100,000 in 10 years. Every year went up $100,000. $100,000 per year for 10 years. Brownstone was the same. It was an artificial inflation within the value. There was no real value to justify it. And of course, when you had 200,000 people working in the financial district and other industries that had big incomes, they were the new upper middle class. And banks were willing to give them mortgage. People wanted to sign deals. I would see people, friends of mine, who would get a call from a broker and say, bring your checkbook. They hadn't even seen the apartment. They were expected that if it was the right apartment, they would sign the moment they got there. This actually happened. I saw it. I saw it constantly. Real estate brokering in New York was the easiest job we've ever seen. There were no vacancies. And I even saw it in my own building. I saw low maintenance. A lot of older people. In came the baby boomers. Now they wanted to change everything. They wanted the special elevators and they wanted the special health clubs. Not because the other people in the building wanted it, because they wanted it, right? Now the maintenance goes from from $400 a month to $700 a month to $1,100 a month, $1,300 a month. My maintenance went up 300% in 5 years. And I finally sold my apartment that I'd lived in for 20 years. Why? Because I realized simple math. If my 6-room apartment, 7-room apartment was valued at $500,000 in a bad market, and someone bought it and paid $100,000 down, that's a $400,000 mortgage, which is about a $3,400, at that time it was about $4,000 at 10% interest at that time. It's about a $4,000 monthly payment on the mortgage. Now, if the maintenance was $1,700 then, and going up in 5 years, the maintenance would have been $2,800. Maintenance alone at that cost would have made the value of the apartment worthless, because remember, whatever you buy on long term, you're paying approximately 300% total. You're paying 3 times when you factor in your upgrade, your insurance, your taxation, the interest on what you paid for. It's about 300%. So I'm thinking, only an idiot would buy this. And yet all over New York, people wanted that. Now, why did they want that building? Why did they want that apartment and 10,000 others like it? I'm going to get to that, because that's a part of our belief system. And if you don't identify it, you're going to continue to perpetuate it. And then the market crashed, and then all these people lost their, apartments. They lost everything. And sometimes they lost everything their parents had given them. Now they borrow from their parents. Well, the market came down, and all the middle class who had been living in New York could no longer afford the taxes of living in New York. And as a result, they started to move out to the suburbs or out of state altogether. So then in New York, you had the phenomena of a large middle class up until about 1970, shrinking until now middle class people cannot afford to live in New York. Where are they going to live? They can't live in Soho, it's too expensive. The Upper East Side, the Upper West Side, where? There's no place for them. And so and even major corporations. Why should major corporations come to New York and pay an extra 8%, just 8% just for doing business in New York City? That's why they're going to Texas, another place where there are no state income taxes. And other states are giving corporations major incentives, and people to live there major incentives. But we couldn't do that because we had this big budget. Now, people, middle class, used to use all the schools. And up until the 1970s, whites and blacks and Hispanics all went to the school together. But now when the upper middle class came in, upper middle class clearly defines itself by what it doesn't associate with. And upper middle class does not associate with anything that's not of its own class, white or black. Because once you become upper middle class, you lose your blackness. You do. You start to look like, dress like, speakease like, and adapt to a certain value system, unless you're an unusual person, and there are unusual people. But by and large, and I have a lot of black friends who, when they were at one level of income, they adapted, dressed, did, and then when they got accepted in and got up, and one day they're sitting around a conference table, they're not going to be dressing in a way that's going to make them stand out. And so the income, the dress, the same with all the other classes, all the other ethnic groups. It blended in to be accepted. Remember, paradigms accept you and will tolerate you as long as you're making money for them, as long as you're not threatening. The moment you do something that makes them look bad or feel bad, then you're warned and then you're excluded. Most people get the warning. Tone down the shirt, tone down the tie, cut the hair, and you're told these little things. You may not think they're important. Well, they are important. It's part of the adaptation to survive. It's what we're conditioned to believe. Conversely, have any of you ever seen people living in the projects dressing up and staying dressed up and socializing in that environment? You do that, and either A, you're going to get yourself hit as a target, or B, you're going to make other people feel that somehow, what's this guy doing? You're going to make other people feel strange based upon how different you are. Doesn't mean you're a different person, but you will stand out as different. So we're very clever in how we will adjust ourselves to the environment we're in. Our manners even will change to the environment we're in and the people we're around. How you'll talk around your friends and your peers is not the same as how you'll talk when you're considered in better company, or when you're around someone important, or when you want to make, you're not going to sit and talk with the priest, the rabbi, or the nun the same as you would with your brother or sister. Now, so what happened was all these individuals lost value in their property. The middle class couldn't come back. It was excluded. Now, the parks, the services that were originally meant for everyone, but primarily for the middle class, now became abandoned. When was the last time any so-called liberal, open-minded yuppie sent their kid to a private school or public school? I don't see Ted Kennedy. I don't see Andrew Stein. I don't see any of these people who are such hypocrites. That's what disgusts me about that whole movement. Not a chance. They sent their kids to the private school. Why? What are some of the reasons? Let's hear the reasons. We all know them. And remember, here, I don't want anyone to be politically correct. I want you to be honest. You won't be judged on it. You meet the right people in the private schools. Who are you going to meet in a public school?
It's safer.
It's safer. Why is it safer?
Obviously because you don't have blacks.
Okay, so blacks then mean the world is unsafe wherever there's a black. All right? Do we all agree upon that? Well, why wouldn't you send your kid to a public school?
You don't want to contaminate it.
You don't want to contaminate it with what kind of thoughts?
Any thought that is outside of your own point of reference, you consider important and valuable.
Okay, so therefore you don't want to share thoughts with your kid that may in any way challenge their existing belief systems the parents and others have laid down for them. So now we're dealing in racist notions. Are we then going to accept that an awful lot of people are closet racists and don't want to acknowledge it, would like to keep their so-called liberal image, right? Let's all get behind Ruth Messinger, make ourselves look absolutely proletariat, but where are your kids going to school? Why? Is it to assume that every kid in a public school is a criminal? Is every kid in a public school illiterate? Are they all slow learners? Are they all got razor blades in their hair? Are they all members of gangs? No, absolutely not. But when you abandon the services that you are paying for with your taxpayer dollar, you then don't like the idea that you are paying for something you're not getting benefit of. Now comes the other side. I don't want to pay taxes on something my kid's not taking advantage of. I'm not going to pay taxes for your kid to go to your school and end up being a criminal and or illiterate. My kid's going to a private school. I'm paying a lot of money for that. Now I should pay for your kid to go to school? Do you see the game they play? Well, then if everybody starts to abandon the public school system to go to private schools and then don't want to support with their taxpayers and they're in positions of power, then they influence legislation and they also influence public opinion. Like a mass exodus, everybody pulls their kids out. They also pull themselves out, if they're financially able, from areas that they would be deemed not according to their class. So they don't live in Co-op City. They don't live in Queens. They live where you can identify your wealth, identify your position. Then what ends up happening to the public school system? There's no support for it. It deteriorates. The infrastructure deteriorates. The support for the teachers deteriorates. Teacher salaries are not considered essential, therefore. The public system, the subway system, the parks, what a person's not using, they don't feel that they should in any way be supporting. As a result, New York has become a city, not like unlike other cities, very similar in fact, where you have lower income and upper income. The services are either very expensive and exclusionary or very poor. Right? You don't find many people saying, hey, let's go out and go to a middle-class restaurant. But I thought you're making $200,000 a year. God, you're right. Let's go to one of these French restaurants, can't even pronounce the name, and eat stuff I don't even know what it is, under so much cream, all I can do is be mucusy all night. But somehow we'll let people know that we spent $100 on this and signed it off the corporation, and maybe we'll be seen by someone looking to be seen by someone else looking to be seen. Right? And we kind of assume that the middle class will go to nondescript restaurants, and the poor will go to fast food restaurants. When society services these segments, right? They service them so that they can extract every dollar, that they are smarter than a lot of people in that system. It's amazing how we figure all this out. How do we entertain ourselves before we had money? A buddy of mine says, gee whiz, I can't be happy. I said, why? He says, I'm broke. I said, well, I guess you're right. You know, there's nothing in life to live for except money then. You must be a very dull person when you're by yourself. You don't have any money to entertain yourself. You just got you. Right? Well, what did you do before you had money? Do any of you ever remember those days when there was not a lot of money, so you did something else? What do you do when you don't have money?
Hobbies.
Huh?
You had hobbies.
You had hobbies, all right? So you engaged yourself in that way. What else? You read. The average American, I should say this, 60% of all Americans never read another book after high school. 60% never read one book after high school. 30% of the remainder only read one book a year. So we don't read anymore because we don't need to. What else? What else did we do before we had money?
You have quilting bees.
You had what?
And in Colonial days, people would get together and, do quilting. You know, quilt.
Well, maybe where you lived. I can assure you, no one else in this room sat around quilting, and you don't look like you're Amish. Right? Yeah, right. Sit around quilting. Jesus. Yes.
Spend time with your friends.
You spend time with your friends, right? Or your family. But you engaged yourself. You used your mind. You found things to be interested in. You traveled a lot. You know, you saw things. You did things. You played. More time for play. Okay. How does the lack of security affect our relationship with ourselves? What happens when we don't have security, or we feel we are lacking security? How does that affect us? How do we feel when we wake up in the morning?
Feel victimized.
You feel victimized. You feel what? Depressed. What else? Huh? Fear. Fear of what?
Fear of whatever comes.
Fear that somehow you're not worthy, that somehow you've let yourself down, you've let others down because you're not this stable person. Do we also equate masculinity, self-esteem, self-value with our security, and generally financial security or materialistic security? So if you don't have that, then what image are you going to project to people? Hi, Mom. Hi, friends. I'm very happy. You should like me. I'm broke. Right? No, we never say you should like me because I'm broke. We say my son, and she did, and they have, and look at this, and it costs so much. We even kept the price tags on. Right? Nobody ever says, gee, what a ring. I don't want to know how much it cost. Right. Gee, what, that car, my God, that's a strange, beautiful, how much that set you back? See? All right. So we can agree then that a relationship with ourselves is adversely affected when we have a lack of security that can affect our emotions, how we deal with other people, who we might exclude ourselves from because we don't feel that we are solvent. We don't feel that we're relaxed enough. We feel, my God, I shouldn't be happy and playing. I'm insecure. I should be doing something right now to make money, to get more secure. I shouldn't be hanging out. And so we have that mindset. Like that man who was afraid if he didn't get this call beeped into him. But where we live, how does our sense of security affect where we live? All right, financially safe, or you're talking about safe as far as the neighborhood. Then we're recognizing that the problem exists between classes. So already there's that class thing coming in, that thing we're not supposed to talk about, the things that's not supposed to exist, because we have no problem that we feel can't be resolved as long as we have welfare. But has welfare changed crime? No. Has welfare changed suffering? No, for a lot of people, it does what?
It makes it worse.
How does it make it worse?
It makes people dependent. They don't do anything. They don't learn how to be self-sufficient.
That's right. If you're going to do it all for them, why should they do it for themselves? If you give so much money for each child a person has, then they become breeding machines. They frequently will lose the value of a child's life. Ask the people that I talk with who've committed crimes, the delinquents, how many of them have a mother or father, or both, that loved them, cared for them, and gave them what they needed to feel as if they were a whole person? Almost zero. They generally come from families where they were not given attention, time, or the wrong attention, and a lot of abuse. Therefore, they're not given the understanding of what the spiritual value of life is or the basic ethics of life. If they see others around them manipulating and conniving and playing the games of survival, then out in the street they have no hesitation of playing the same games in the way that they would have to play them. And frequently that means just robbing, stealing, or inflicting pain as a part of that process. And it can come in the middle class if the parents have not given their children the right values, as well as any other class. There is no barrier of class that prevents crime from occurring. But we never think, let's move into a rich neighborhood where we're going to be victimized. The victimization there doesn't occur because someone holds you up at gunpoint. It can happen in a different way on an economic and manipulative scale that affects your life in ways that you never would imagine. But every class is equally capable of victimizing anyone else. The man or woman who becomes the director of a corporation that takes over a plant and decides arbitrarily to release people because it is not in that person's profit and others that have gotten the money together to buy that operation to keep that going. They can displace people. And by the way, from 1975 until 1984, 11 million Americans who had been gainfully employed lost their gainful employment because of that kind of power. So you see, those people didn't come from the middle class who were making those decisions. Those come from a wealthier class and a more upper economic strata. But it was the new upper mobile people, not the old. The old understood the order of society and protected the status quo wherever possible. The new had no idea what they should be doing except making money for themselves. So where you live will frequently dictate how you feel about yourself. For instance, I saw in the paper where they wanted to put a gate yesterday across a road in Newark, separating Newark from the next township. Just a fence, as if that's going to keep crime out. A fence is going to keep crime out? No way. It's like the handgun bill, you know. Let's prevent handguns or make people register. I've never seen a criminal went in and bought legally a gun. You know, they don't have to. You can get any gun you want, from a tank to a bazooka to probably a nuclear weapon somewhere up on the streets of New York City if you got enough money. That's not a deterrent. But if you want to look at the real cause of this problem, you would in effect have to look at how we're raising our children and what the children are missing that is causing the street gang to replace, because it's merely a substitution. What you don't give that the child can accept and feel is enough, they're going to then replace with something else, and it's never going to be generally what it should be. And just look at the gangs. The gangs are another form of bonding, another form of ego identification, where no one paid attention to the child's needs for ego development. Now the gang does. Except instead of doing it in a softball game, instead of doing it in a craft, instead of helping the child make something and show that they did a good job no matter what they do, now no one paid attention to those needs. You just gave them what the child needed. Now the child goes out. But now it's not building a little, tugboat or building a little motor car on a craft center, playing basketball or football. Now it's how many kids can they kill? How many people can they mug? I know, just last Saturday night I was attacked by 7 people right on Broadway. Yeah, me. Yeah. 7 guys. And it was nothing unusual. It's the way it is. Fortunately, I'm from West Virginia. And these guys got a little lesson in don't screw with the wrong people. Because I was not one of those New Yorkers that, runs and hides. Because I didn't, because they sucker punched me in the back of the head walking into a health food store of all things. And they were there for one reason only, rip off and punish. And they've been doing this all up and down Broadway. No one did a thing. Even in the store, 45 people, no one did a thing. But fortunately, I know how to handle myself. I know how to fight. And after I punched 4 of these guys out, then the other guys got their buddies and they took off. But a guy came over and says, gee whiz, that was tough. I says, why did you just stand there and watch it? You could have called the police. You could have done something. Well, I don't want to get involved. Now, that's interesting. No, that's fine. He doesn't want to get involved. He doesn't have to. On the news tonight, there was a woman was being mugged in San Francisco, and a whole group of young men were standing around watching it, and an 89-year-old man came to her aid and beat off the mugger. 89 years old, with his cane. Yeah.
I tell you something, Gary. I fell down the street on Broadway about a year or 2 years ago, and a lot of people walking by. I mean, a lot of baby boomer, yuppie type people walking by, my neighbors, my friends, so to speak, and nobody picked me up except a very old, slightly inebriated fellow who said, nobody picked you up. I said, you did.
Did you marry him? That's the only reason the baby boomers didn't help you. They were already married, you see? Well, the lesson was simple. New York has become a city, and it's interesting to watch, and I'm going to project ahead about 25 years, where you're either very rich and live in little enclaves that are guarded constantly by security patrols and exclude anyone who cannot show that they belong there, like you have communities around the United States now, and the middle class will be completely gone by then. And you'll have poor. Now, unfortunately, we assume that poor are always illiterate, insensitive, and they don't have needs like the rest of us. And since we won't be doing anything to help them help themselves, because we haven't up to this point, then you're going to have massive violence, because within that poor element will be those who see the opportunity to take advantage of the weakness of the system. And you'll have a city that is 5% Paris and 95% Beirut. You will have a war zone. Eventually, something like New York City may be given over exclusively and completely just to the poor element, where the entire city will become a housing project. And all around America, if you're homeless or you're in a poor, you'll be subsidized to come here and live. And all the other people, middle class and others, will go outside the city. Now, you think that's not possible? Look carefully. Because you now have entire communities where people go to so that no one outside of their class can be around them to affect them. Sedona is a good example. You can't buy a home in Sedona unless you got a lot of money. There are buildings that you can't get into because the co-op boards won't let you in, no matter how much you want. It's that exclusion factor. And now you just take that on a whole country basis. And you'll take the worst case scenario when the budget can't be managed, when public services can't be maintained, when the entire infrastructure collapses. And who's going to keep it going? Remember, the middle class has always kept New York City going. Not the wealthy, they get exclusions. And not the poor, they get subsidized. It's the middle class. So when you have no middle class, who's going to pay for the enormous debt, the billions of dollars a year? Right now we have a $1.4 billion gap. It's not going to be easily met. So as a result, you're going to have a city having to, in effect, relinquish itself. And there's where the federal government would come in, and probably every other governors and other states, and say, let's make one city in effect, a refugee camp, and give it over. It will take probably 25 years, but once it starts, real fast corporations and people will leave. Already, New York is the #1 state in America where people are leaving, more than any other state. Watch how quickly it happens. I predict New York will be a complete welfare society in 25 to 30 years. So where we live directly affects our security. A lot of people, if you ask them to move to a different location in America where they would have to be moving from a particular lifestyle, would feel anxiety about it because they have to readjust their image of themselves. Downscaling is not easy to do if everything that you believe you are is tied in with your current lifestyle. Where we eat, it directly is based upon who we feel we are and what image we have to project. We're always projecting an image. Remember how your house looks, what food you eat. This is a part of our image of self. Our scheduling, our clothes, our jewelry, our freedoms to experience. If you feel insecure, are you willing to experience freedom? Never. Why? Why? Huh?
Free, you have to take charge. Insecure,
You have to take chances, you have to take risks if you want to experience freedom. You know the boundaries of the problem that you're in. If you're in a bad relationship, for instance, you're in a bad job, you live in a neighborhood that is no longer safe for you because people in the neighborhood who are mercenary have learned to take advantage of people who are, in effect, victims of that neighborhood. And by the way, the biggest victims of gangs are poor people. Okay? We forget that. You know, the people in Harlem and Brownsville who are always victimized are first the people who live there. It's only when someone gets hurt in the upper middle income that suddenly it's news, right? As if everybody else didn't count, as if everybody else who has a color to their skin doesn't have the same value as someone who doesn't. But they don't, not in our society, unless they are also in that group. If Michael Jordan, or if Eddie Murphy, or if Bill Cosby gets in an altercation or is mugged, that's news. If you do, that's nothing. Well, that's racism. That's classism. And our society permeates this. We value a person upon their standing in a society. Their race then comes second. Unless they're poor, then their race comes first. Because you have a poor white and a poor black, the poor white will frequently have options the poor black will not. So if you want to experience freedom, you better have the confidence and the security that whatever you're going to do and taking risks to experience freedom are going to be outside the boundaries of predictability. So when you have something that you know may not be always good or always bad, it's tolerable, and you say, now I'm going to try something completely new, and then, whoa, you see, well, wait, I'm going to try this new, but there's no gold standard. I don't know how far I can go or what I should do or how I should feel. There's no feedback. I just got to experience it. Yeah, that's what freedom is. You got to experience it. You have to be the architect of it. You have to take some risks. If you're not willing to take any risks, then there's no reward without risks. And in a class system that we have, that we are absolutely stamped in, the middle class never take risks, ever. There is no risk in middle class. And there's no risk in poor class. The only risk is in the upper class, and ironically, we let the upper class take risks, and we give them rewards far beyond what is reasonable for the risks they've taken. Someone starts a new business, and they make $100 million, and we think, yo, they deserve it. Well, maybe they do, but when is enough to meet the real needs of the person where you can then start to say, why did I do this to begin with? Did I do this to make every dollar there is to make? Am I that insecure, or do I do this until I feel I have enough, and then can I pull back? The trouble is, in the society we have, no one is ever encouraged to pull back from success. As a result, we burn out on success. We burn out on affluence. We burn out on credit cards. We burn out on shopping. We become addicted to the very things we thought if we had, we would be more balanced, and in getting them, we imbalance ourselves even more. So very few people could ever experience freedom. They could not have a healthy scheduling of their lives. Their insecurity would dictate their scheduling. You will schedule your life differently when you feel secure versus insecure. How would you schedule if you feel secure? What?
schedule time for growth and trying.
Time for growth, time for happiness, time for play, time for relating with yourself, time for introspection, meditation, prayer, joy, friendship, happiness. You're going to schedule it because you want it, because it's essential for you. If I asked you, would you rather have more money or more freedom, which would you select? more freedom. Why?
Because with freedom, I can do anything. Money always has limitations.
Money has a price beyond its value. To earn a certain amount of money, you have to give something up. The first thing you give up is time. There is no commodity you have in life that is more valuable than time, and yet when you try so hard to make more money, your value of time becomes equal to the value of money you're trying to make. What if you said your time is not buyable? There's no value you're going to place on it because you're not going to sell it. Then it's priceless. Now, if you're walking around with a priceless commodity, your time, then shouldn't you do something with it that shows its value? If you want to spend an afternoon going to the museums and walking through there, that's valuable time. That's expressing freedom to be without conditions to prove that you deserve that time. People feel guilt for doing things that other people are not doing because they feel that they have to justify the time by a value system. That's why people who hang out in a Laguna Beach, or the people who dropped out of society and went to other places just to be with themselves, or the ascetic mind, the austere mind, we devalue that. Why do we devalue that? Why? Why don't we give value to the people who have that mindset? Why? Because in our mind, we don't believe that they're using their time constructively. How could you be constructive? You're loafing, you're a bum, you're not earning any money, you're out and hanging out at the beach, counting seashells. That's stupid. You have an education, you have talent, you have skills, you have marketing capabilities. There's dollars to be made. There's only so many days to make it, and you're not making it. You're out there hanging out. That shows that you don't respect your own talents. The woman says, no, I'm respecting the value of my time. The only thing that's mine. You can take away my home, my apartment, my car, my clothes. You can take away my degrees. You can take away everything, but you can't take away my time. That's mine. But then we don't use our time as if it were valuable at all. And then one day we wake up and you look in the mirror and all you see is a face that no longer resembles the one that you saw when you still valued time, when you played with time. And then you get angry. Where have the years gone? Right? How did all these gray hairs get there so fast? Where did these wrinkles come from? And then you look around and you start to look at other things in your life that no longer have the same value because you valued other things, including the access of money, more than you did having time with your friends, having time with your children. Parents don't realize what a small window of time they have to share with their children. And then one day the children are gone and you think, gee whiz, I wish you could have more. Well, you can't. It's gone. It's gone forever. My friends are friends only if they share time with me. If they don't share time, they're not my friends. And I don't let anyone get away with the excuse that, oh, I'm your friend even though we haven't been around for a while. No, you're not my friend. Period. I don't want you to think you are. My friends are people who are in my life. It's that simple. Our freedom to experience sex. When we feel secure about ourselves, are we willing to try things sexually that we otherwise wouldn't? Sure. Yeah? What are you willing to try? Tell us in detail. Everything.
She'll show you the video.
Now, let me just ask you as a whole. I realize those of Connecticut do not have to answer. But everyone else who has sex, I want you to answer this. If you feel secure in yourself, have you opened yourself up to your own sexual experience? Right? Why did you?
It was there.
It was there, you took an opportunity for it, right? You weren't afraid of it. What weren't you afraid of?
Myself.
You weren't afraid of what you would feel. We don't fear things sexually because of what someone will do to us. That's a ruse, that's a red herring. We fear sex and expressing ourselves because of what we will feel that will displace what we were conditioned to believe we should feel. And we were never told that we should enjoy sex, except under very careful conditions. Well, could you imagine suddenly having the freedom to experience sex in the way you wanted to experience it, by the rules that you wanted to explore, and you let go of all the preconditioned notions of how sex should affect you? What is right or wrong? Where you no longer deal in rights or wrongs? What the society, what your class says you could do. Instead, you're just saying, I have feelings in here that I want to share, and I'm not afraid to share them. I'm not afraid of what I'm going to feel. I'm not afraid of what I'm going to do. And then having healthy sex and happy sex that we never talk about. We never tell the children, you know, have happy sex, right? That would not wash in a middle-class society. We will say have safe sex, but never happy sex. Like somehow, oh, we both hate this. God, I hate this. Not going to feel good. You know, but use the condom. All right, I'll use the condom, and I'm not going to enjoy this for 1 second. Let's get this over with as quickly as we can. Right, Franco? So, that's all you do talk about. So that's just one little area. So think of all the people who feel insecure about themselves, and therefore they will not explore their own sexuality, their own masculinity and femininity, the uniqueness of their own gender because of limitations. And when people get into financial crisis or they feel insecure, their libido goes out the window frequently. And that causes a lot of dissatisfaction in relationships. And it shouldn't, but it does. Now, with creativity, what happens when we feel freedom to experience creativity? What are we willing to do? Are these cardboard cutout characters back here? You look like Harpo Marx. You look like Chico Marx. Nobody's saying a thing. I'm going to talk with this group.
You would go beyond any thought. You wouldn't even worry about limits when it comes to creativity.
That's right, there are no limits. Stop accepting limits. Limits are established to keep people within the paradigm. If you do not acknowledge the limit, then you must establish your own limits. Now, everybody needs a limit, but it's a limit that they should gauge is necessary for them, not for someone else. If I sleep a few hours a night, I place certain limits, of course, then on, I do not place the limits on what my energy should be. I might want to be in bed for 8 hours if I were the average person, thinking I have to have 8 hours of sleep because everybody has 8 hours of sleep, and the doctor says you must have 8 hours of sleep. But what if I don't need 8 hours of sleep? Then I'm limiting myself. What if I go to train in a certain way and I start using certain nutrients and I find out that the more nutrients I use of certain like DMG and glutathione and N-acetylcysteine and vitamin C and pycnogenol, the quicker my recovery. They say only use a few milligrams of vitamin E and nothing else matters. Well, they put a limit on what an athlete should use. That limits the athlete. I don't put the limit. I see what the body will do. I see where my breakdown points are, where my exhaustion points are, and then I come back off that a bit. Therefore, I don't exceed the normal boundaries of what I can do, but my boundaries may be far beyond or far shorter than someone else's. But if we all accept the same limits to everything, then there's no creativity, there's no spontaneity, there's nothing that's going to go beyond that artificial limit. So ask yourself, how many limits do you accept in your own life in creating? And as a result, the limits are there so you don't create at all. Right? And therefore you stay sterile. The mind doesn't grow, it doesn't flourish. Now, in intellect, how does freedom to experience intellect manifest? How? How? Yes?
You believe other people tell you it's right, and never think for yourself.
A freedom of intellect allows you to see what your mind will be able to process and understand that previously was not there. Therefore, you get away from fixed notions of how things should be and looking at things the way they are. Today I heard on television Dr. Fauci say the war on AIDS, that megavitamins have nothing to do with the immune system, they can't affect it, and therefore not helping people with AIDS. Now, I'm sure he believes that. I don't believe he was false in his statements to himself, but it is a false statement. Intellectually, he has not grown he is staying fixated in his paradigm. He's still looking for the chemotherapy or the vaccine to help this single virus because that's his intellectual perception. It is unlimited intellectual perception. You see, we've got this mistaken notion that as long as you have a degree, an advanced degree or MD or PhD, that gives you an intellectual insight. Wrong. Absolutely wrong. I've never met an intellect who was an MD or PhD who used their degrees or their education as the standard for their identification of what is or is not. I've met people who've never been to college who I feel have a greater intellect than many of the people who have the most degrees, because not willing to stay within the confines of one belief. They're breaking through it. That's how we progress. That's how Einstein dissolved the notion of Newtonian physics and developed quantum physics. You know, that's how Enrico Fermi was able to split the atom, because his intellect wasn't limited to that paradigm. If it were, he wouldn't have been working in that area. That's why Rivisi works in lipids and others not working in it. And Linus Pauling working in vitamin C and others not trusting it. So do you see that as long as you keep thinking that certain things are a way they are, and if those don't give you fulfillment and prosperity of mind and spirit and body, then the intellect is causing you the problem. Therefore, free the intellect, which frees the mind, and you go beyond the old belief system, and you have a new way of thinking. It's like the person who thinks, well, you know, I don't know any other ways of dealing with the problem, so I'll just deal with so if I'm not using my intellect, instead of choosing to deal with the problem with solutions, I'll deal with the problem by complaining. That's how the intellect works. So we have a nation of complainers, or we have a nation of doers. That's why when I say that 25 million Americans who lost their jobs or were in the process of going through the same financial crisis as everyone else did not allow themselves to be limited by their intellect. They chose to create their own home-based businesses, and whatever it was, got into their own life, took all the risks, no certainties, and instead of looking at blaming the company let me go, I no longer have a standard of living, I can't pay my mortgage, I'm so stressed out I don't have a happy relationship, my children aren't getting any positive energy, my wife or husband are not getting healthy sex, I'm not relating to them, look at my body, I'm going to hell. What you normally hear in people. They said, what a great opportunity to experience freedom for the first time. No longer have to work 9 to 5. I may want to work 9 to 9, but I'm going to be working for myself, and it's going to give me joy. I'm going to grow. I'm going to experience. I'm going to experiment. But to do that, I've got to go beyond the boundaries. I've got to use my intellect. The intellect is the vehicle to get me from here to there. I cannot use the intellect if I trust the old system that is limited to what the authorities and experts told me. I've got to trust there's something else. So that person trusts in something else, something inside, something visceral, intuitive, and they connect with support systems, they get input where they've not gotten before, and they have the confidence to take a step into the void, into the unknown. In that void and in that unknown, there are answers. Answers they didn't know the questions to before they took the chance. That's the excitement about growing in intellect. You now have questions, you now have answers that you never even asked the question to find. That is the quantum thinking. And now these people have their own businesses with new services that benefit us, new products that we can enjoy. You go into any health food store, you go into any food emporium, you go into anything that we haven't seen before, and you'll see stuff, you say, wow, that's a great idea. Who thought of that? Have you ever done that? You're saying, this is a great idea. I wish I'd have thought of that. Well, you could have thought of it. Do you think your brain is any less than your brain, or your breast less than your brain? No, it's not less. But the moment you think it is, the moment you trust someone else, because you're middle class, you shouldn't have a brain that exceeds itself. As long as your needs are being taken care of and you're supporting the status quo, you're not supposed to have an intellect. So we never have intellects within the middle class of our society. Have you ever noticed that? We have it in the upper middle class. We have it in the upper class. And ironically, the upper class generally doesn't have an intellect as much as it has power and control on dealing with the existing status quo. They're the ones who are making $5 billion this year off the AIDS war. Not with answers, but they're controlling it. They're smart. But street smarts is not intellect. That's a survival instinct in a very Machiavellian way of taking advantage of weaknesses within a system and perceiving yourself and making others perceive you as smart. So we have all these yuppies out there posturing themselves in power positions, making us believe that they're smart because they have the money, the class, the clothing, the position of power, the credentials, the pedigree, the place to live, the foods to eat, the restaurants that cater to them, the first in line, and we say, wow, I can't compete with that. I don't have any of that. See, I'm still watching Oprah, and they're not, and I'm gossiping on the phone, and they're not. I'm suffering from all these conditions, and they're not, and they got money in the bank, and I don't. So I'm a victim. I got to blame. I got to watch Phil Donahue and Sally and all these other people and associate with other victims. And that's what you've got. And then along comes someone who was in that middle class who comes up with a great idea and markets it, and now we see it in the National Enquirer, right? Woman goes from, welfare to $10 million a year industry. Gee, what a fluke. No, people weren't afraid. Someone had to take a risk. Someone had to take a chance. Mentally, intellectually. Never believe that you are as smart as people have told you. Believe you are smarter. Freedom to experience travel, or freedom to experience other beliefs. How does that help us? New perspective. Why? How does it give us new perspective?
Somebody else would be different.
Someone else completely different. Good. What can we learn from something completely different from another belief?
We don't know till we get there.
That's right. But it can either enhance or challenge our own beliefs. All right? So in order to be open to even experience another belief system or another culture, you have to what?
Go there.
You have to experience it and be willing to let go of fixed beliefs that you have about your own system. That's a very dangerous thing. And that's why we are always anti-cultural. We're very nationalistic. We don't want to benefit from other cultures. We may like to travel to a place to see the superficial part, but you never have people saying, let's have classes in intercultural relationships. That is generally not accepted. Not in all class systems. Upper class we accept it. Middle class we don't. Lower class we don't. In travel, we can travel anywhere. We can see the world. We can see our own country. We can see our own city. I know people live in New York who've never seen New York. They limit to what they'll even experience in New York. And they won't go to certain places because, again, they're biases. It's not the right neighborhood. What's to see? It's not a, it's just a middle-class neighborhood, or it's just a, lower-income middle neighborhood. You see 1,000 ways these biases come out when you start to talk with people, and they don't know their biases. They don't know how self-limiting they are. When you free your mind, then you free yourself to experience any place, anywhere, and everything gives you a perspective. Now, do we feel that unless we are secure, we have failed to meet our responsibilities? You bet. Most people are traumatized by the idea that failure to meet responsibilities means they failed at life, that other people are going to look down on them, criticize them, or feel that they're not worthy of the position that frequently we have put them in. And they're frequently true because in relationships, especially where there is a crisis in security, one game couples frequently play on each other, children will play to parents, everybody plays, is you let me down. How many times have people heard that? I expected and you let me down. You didn't provide. You're supposed to be this, you're supposed to be providing that. And now the person feels a tremendous sense of guilt, and now they're motivated for the wrong reasons, guilt and fear. And that drives them into desperation, which frequently traumatizes them and ties them up so they can't do anything, or it drives them to exceed in ways that become far in excess of what their responsibility should be. They become compulsive and addicted to the very process of showing that they're responsible. How many people do you know are overly responsible? They never know how to say no. Right? Always willing to take on the responsibilities of everyone else and rarely take time out for themselves. That's a part of this syndrome. What skills do you have that you haven't used or fully developed? Because that's what's going to allow you to change. I'm always meeting people who say, I can't do this, I don't have that. I can't experience something because I'm not skilled enough. Well, everyone has skills that they just don't use or don't value or don't think are important. But they are important. Give you an example. An artist who was absolutely miserable, a graphic artist working in a major clothing store in New York City, came to me and said that he wanted to make a change and he didn't know what he wanted to do. And I said, well, you're a graphic artist. What would you like to do? He said, well, I can't do anything else. I don't have any other skills. I says, well, you're a graphic artist in an industry behind a computer, working on schedules and deadlines. You feel pressed. You work late. You don't have time for yourself. What if you could take those basic skills and reapply them in a completely different environment? One in which you could do what you wanted with your basic skills, but do them in a way that honored your time and energy. He said, I'd love that. I said, well, travel around the United States, see the place that feels best to you, and then look to see what you could do by adapting your skills to that environment. Well, this person did. Took 3 months, traveled around the United States, and settled in Texas. And today that person works with Native Americans, helping them take their ideas about their history and their culture and put it into art designs. And a very, very unique and special thing. Now, where Indians would not have been able to do this always on their own in a way that would be understood or appreciated or even marketable, now they have something that identifies their own feelings about their culture, the beauty of the work, using one person's skills, another person's knowledge and history, combining them synergistically, sharing a common experience. Before it would have been excluding the experiences. Now it's sharing. The key word for survival in the 90s is share. Share common strengths. Get away from this individual, I got to do it my way. That doesn't work. Working together works. This man is just as happy as he can be. He's just up here and he just dropped by this afternoon to see me. And he's got more projects, more people coming to him wanting to do the same thing because word got around. Now all kinds of people are coming and say, gee whiz, can you put my ideas into some artwork? I saw what you did. Now he's got a whole showing and he's working with all kinds of people in that environment. He loves the environment, sets his own time, sets his own schedule, works out, came up and ran the marathon, things he'd never been able to do for himself. And he doesn't need all the money. I said, John, how much money do you need? He says, just enough to get by. He says, I'm happy. He says, I'm happy being out there with animals. I'm happy spending time with people. I'm happy just talking, reading, giving time to myself. He says, I haven't done this my whole life. And I get something nice that I get to do creatively that helps other people express themselves too. So look for the skills and talents that you have not used in the right environment, in the right circumstances. Using a worst case scenario, where will you get support when all else fails? And you better think about that, because sooner or later, all else does fail. All right? And if you can look to where you can survive under the worst case scenario, then you shouldn't be pressured about your day-to-day existence. Otherwise, we're always tentative about taking any steps that would release us from the support system we have because of fear that there wouldn't be any support for us if we make a mistake. Therefore, we're not willing to make a mistake, challenge, take a position, identify ourselves. Who do we emulate in our values or the class beyond our own? Frequently, people are looking to be something. It's almost always looking to emulate something that's beyond their class. And that's why we're so preoccupied with soap operas, the wealthy, people who have a class or two above us. Their lifestyles are rich and famous. We love even if we know we'll never do it, the emulation of it. Why? What does that mean? What does that tell us?
We don't want to look at our own lives.
We don't want to look at our own lives. Why don't we want to look at our own lives?
Someone else's lives because we're afraid that we won't match up to our own expectations.
expectations of ourselves.
That's right. We're living under our own expectations, and we're fearful that if we have to acknowledge our real expectations, we haven't actualized our own expectations. So we project upon someone else and give them our time and attention, saying, gee whiz, that person did it, you know, but we don't say, well, maybe I can do it.
And it's the fear that we're not going to see what we want more than it is what we really are.
Yeah.
We're afraid of it.
Good point. Anyone else?
I think we accept living vicariously through the other people. Just accept that.
We accept the vicariousness. Boy, how boring most people's lives would be if they didn't have someone else to pay attention to outside of themselves. Okay? Which means we're not paying attention to ourselves. Because people who pay attention to themselves don't have to be working about paying attention to other people. They're spending more than enough time upon themselves. How does the security mindset affect you? How does it? Where everything has to be based upon security.
The likelihood of being tentative, so a lot of things.
Everything is tentative. You're walking a tightrope. What else? Huh? It controls our time because we're never willing to do anything outside of that time and space and conditioned environment that would make us feel insecure. Last night I was on a television show. Did any of you see it by the chance? Oh, it was all over America. It was on the... But it doesn't surprise me because you're all somehow genetically inbred to these group up here. The people who have never commented tonight on anything. Anyhow, you know what it is? They're all sitting on potties. They're re-potty training themselves. So anyhow, it was the Food Channel. It was interesting because as people were calling in from all over America, the person who was interviewing me, and they're a very nice person, and it was a physician and a reporter, and the physician said, well, Gary, what would you change? And I said, well, I would get rid of the caffeine, I'd get rid of the sugar. And people said, what's left? And I said, oh, really? You mean that's the only thing you have in your life is caffeine and sugar? Nothing else exists. And I said, why not make people realize that they've got to give up some things and let go of the negative if they want to bring in the positive? And they said, well, you know, people are just too lazy. They're not going to do it. And it's true because people will feel insecure about changing even bad foods. Foods that they eat and they wake up in the next morning, they have puffy eyes and they got indigestion, they got diarrhea, they got gas, they got arthritic pains. They'll still fear giving it up to take something else because the security of maintaining a standard that is fixed. Same breakfast, same lunch, same dinner, the sameness. So you see that security mindset affects you in ways that you're not even aware. Now, are we prepared to make our lives simpler? Are we willing to make our lives less complicated and more interesting? What are you willing to do to make your life simpler? What? What can you do to make your life more simple?
Stop worrying.
Stop fighting. Stop arguing. This idea that somehow relationships are meant to be working constantly on each other's psyche, molding and readjusting, compromising and bending, that's nonsense. If I am a size 10 foot, I'm not going to fit myself into a size 6 shoe and figure that maybe I should cripple myself in the process so I don't have to give up the shoes. I'm not going to live that way. Our relationship either works or it doesn't work. Don't work on them. This is the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. Stupid beyond belief. Well, we're Upper West Side intellectual types, Gary. Our whole life is a mess. It's a crisis. Just ask our therapist for the last 30 years. We hang out with our friends and talk about what doesn't work. We watch Mia Farrow and Woody Allen movies, and they're never funny anymore. And we try to figure out why we're still going to get entertained. People are screwy. When you're with someone that feels right, it's right. When it's not, it's not. There's no scarcity of people. But our ethic is, you made your bed, now you sleep in it. Right? Okay, I guess I got to stay in this relationship for 35 years. And you become the alcoholic, I'll become the drug addict. You become fat, I'll become depressed. You watch television, I'll read the National Enquirer. You know, you displace an occasional affair and feel guilty about it and get herpes or something, and we keep going on this way. The stupidest things in the world. Right? Like somehow we're never going to meet another person, or we cannot meet another person. I'm bound by a law. Oh, the ring, the law. Whew. Stupidest thing in the world, marriage, right? Like somehow, until we crash this glass and sing this song and dance this thing and all these little rituals, now we're bound at the hip. Boom, there we are, one person. Right? Let's walk together through life this way. I want to go this way. No, I want to go this way. I'm angry at you. I'm going to hold this all in. No, we got to do my way. I'm going to cry abuse. I'll cry abuse. Don't go to sleep if I got a knife in my hand. We got a very screwed up society, right? But we'll all end up on television talking about our exes in the most trashy way, right? As the world goes, yeah, tell me more dirt, more dirt, more dirt. Why not just say, hey, I feel good having a relationship with myself. I'm free to explore life and the experiences I want. If I meet someone I can share something with, I'll share it. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And there's going to be some other time for myself or someone else. And if it doesn't work, that's okay. You're not wrong. I'm not wrong. Let's stop looking at who's wrong. Let's look at who's right. I don't care about the 200 people I meet that I don't have a friendship with. I only care about the person I have a friendship with. That's all that matters. There are no shortages of people to be happy with in this world. And somewhere out there, there are natural fits. If you make your life uncomplicated and meet someone else's uncomplicated, you'll have some fit. But we make our lives very complicated. We set to such crazy rules down, and it's impossible for anyone else to meet them. But then we flirt, we show the best of ourselves, we have all these enticing little games of courtship where we want to project that we have something that they need. We want to excite them, we want to titillate them with our mind, our body, our spirit, our sexuality, our income, our status, our watches, our rings, our diamonds, our smiles, our teeth, our nose jobs, our cap, everything that we're going to put forward to say, see, I'm different, I'm unique. You can't get anyone like me. You better get me now. And remember, you're going to pay for it. What am I going to pay? What's the bill? Is it worth it? And we go through these stupid things, right? So we barter. A relationship becomes a matter of value. And we place a value on it. Well, what if you didn't place a monetary value, a materialistic value on a relationship? Rather, you placed a spiritual value. That valuing yourself, you're valuing the other person, you're honoring yourself, you're honoring the other person. Have some fun. Well, of course, to do that, you're going to not be in the middle class. You're not going to be in the lower class. You're going to feel decadent being in the upper class. We don't have a class for this. We don't have autonomy and freedom to experience and explore. You have to be an artist to do that. But you want to make your life simpler, less complicated, you got to give up something. Make a list of what you're willing to give up. What else can you give up to make your life simpler and less complicated? Possessions. What do you possess that you really don't use? What do you mean yourself? What do you really, this guy back here? The guy who sews quilts, and you why don't you two go out and have an etheric experience? Drift away on a raft down the Ganges while you're setting yourself on fire. You're eliminating yourself and he's knitting a quilt watching it. Can't believe it. What else? Uh-huh. It's the same thing. I can't believe it. You speak and his mouth opens. And you're both wearing green. Something is weird here. And you both have high heels and shoes. No, he looked down. He was uncertain. I wore high heel shoes. He caught me. Did I forget? He's wearing a tutu and silk stockings and a beard, and it's a little strange. What can we make our lives more simple by giving up?
Books I haven't read in 30 years.
Why not just take a look tomorrow at anything in your life that you're really not using and give it to someone else? Just give it away. Give it away, throw it away, or use it. But stop clutter. Clutter is what holds us down. It keeps us from being free. And so much of what we do is cluttering our lives because it's one of the ways that we displace our frustration. But we have to buy things that then indebt us, and the indebtedness makes us work to pay the debt. And if we didn't have the debt, then we wouldn't have to have all the money to pay for the debt. Therefore, we could have more time to experience ourselves because we have less debt. The idea is let's get rid of the debt, which means we shouldn't be buying so many things. We certainly shouldn't be buying homes. There's no reason at all. There's no justification for it in the world today. Not in the vicariousness of the real estate market, which is depressed and going to get worse. But that's part of that. I'm middle class, and I've got to buy a home, and I have children, and I've got to work at the factory or the job, and I've got to prove something. What are you proving? Now you've cluttered up your life. Rent. Rent a house, rent a husband, rent some children. Now, do we wait until we're laid off, rejected, or in a crisis and have no choice but to live a more austere existence, or do we start creating the austere existence now? If you wait till you're in a crisis, then your options are limited. If you all start now to make your life more functional, more practical, more joyful, more playful, lighten up, have fun, then you've got flexibility. If you wait till it's all over, then you've got crisis. Would you rather have more free time or more money or more things? You suggested more freedom. That's a good point. Others would want more money, figuring if they had more money, they'd be able to buy more things, which would make them happy, but it would more indebt them. And at a certain point, a person wakes up each day and counts how many debts they have and how much income they have, and they see the income doesn't match the debts, and that creates crisis. The crisis means that now they feel they're going to lose what they bought, and the separation anxiety, the separation of losing something that you are attaching your ego to. Remember, people generally buy major things that will show their position, identify their class or their status, and that means they have to give that up. And that's very, very hard on the ego. But it's only by giving things up that we don't need that we have the freedom to then decide who we want to be, where we want to be. What would you do with your newfound time? I want to hear from you back here. What would you do with your newfound time?
Sleep.
Is this your brother and that's your uncle? Be honest. Who else?
Travel, interact with the world.
You'd like to travel and interact with the world. Why? You don't travel now?
Very rarely.
Okay. You in the back. Doing things that make you happy. That tells me you're not doing enough things to make you happy now. Which means you're not living your own life. Which means you're living someone else's life, which means the belief system is the life that you're living. You're honoring the belief system rather than honoring your own life, right?
Correct.
Give me $100. All right. What are some of the other things you do with your freedom? What would you do with your time now? What? Paint? Think. What? More sports? Study?
Been writing and playing the piano.
Playing the piano? Okay, good. Volunteering more things? More sex? That's not possible.
Get married.
To the person in your quote group? Yes. Hang out with friends and have good talks if you had the time. Okay, what else?
Spend more time in the outdoors, in the woods.
In the woods, okay. Seeing nature, being around nature. You see, these are just simple things that we shouldn't have to think as a big deal, but it is a big deal for not making our life balance so we can regularly incorporate these, not rarely, but regularly. That's why we got to get things out of our life that are cluttering it. Okay. What risks have we taken in each of the important areas of our lives? What risks? Your growth is going to be directly related to what challenges you've given yourself or been given to you and the risks you've taken to grow through those challenges. If you're not having risks, then you're not taking any chances. You're playing it safe, and that tells us that we're playing it safe. We're not looking for discomfort. The moment we hit discomfort, we back off, because with discomfort means we're going to have to give something up, we're going to have to change something, something will change, maybe other people's attitudes towards us, maybe ours towards ourselves or other people, maybe the circumstances of our existence, all of which makes us feel insecure. Therefore, we avoid risks at all costs. We try to play it safe and stay at the periphery, or we try to support other people who are taking the risks for us. That's why hero worship in our society is so tremendous. Let them take the risks. Yes?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were saying, what risks do we take?
And what risks?
Well, for me, it's a combination of two things which makes it very difficult. It's a very metaphysical process. You're trying to release everything and let go and let God, as they say, and at the same time really do social action. So at the same time as I'm doing a lot of social action, I'm also trying to be very quiet about it.
All right.
Kind of crazy.
Well, a lot of times when we make our position known on important social issues, that is a risk. Because traditionally in our society, you'd be filmed if you were making statements by the FBI. You'd be an enemy, considered an enemy of the ruling class if you jeopardized the ruling class. There are risks involved, but we don't have to necessarily take those kind of risks to take other risks in our lives. Just like telling your in-laws. I was with someone last night who said that they just spent a weekend, the husband and wife just spent a weekend with the husband's wife's parents, and the wife, they said, is just absolutely not a nice person on any level. And the husband is not a whole lot better. And I said, well then, why don't you just tell your wife you don't want to go? Yeah? And don't allow the thing of a family obligation. That's hypocritical. You know, what's the purpose? Maybe if you explain why it is you don't feel comfortable being with them, then maybe they might see something in themselves. But if you go and pretend everything's all right, they may not be seeing what's wrong in their behavior. You hadn't thought about that. Of course they don't. A lot of times people don't accept rational explanations, but that's not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to try to communicate openly, honestly, with compassion and sensitivity. You know, and failing that, you just shoot them. So, what can you no longer depend upon to be there for you when you need some form of security? What right now in your life do you feel you can depend upon when you need security? In the world we live in today, I'll tell you, nothing's there for you. No, there are no certainties anymore. Nothing is certain anymore. You think it is? It is not. Every day, people from different walks of life are getting pink slips who before historically would never have gotten a pink slip. And they're getting it by the hundreds of thousands. We have an enormous white-collar middle class that are finding themselves with doctorates and masters and MBAs, are now in the next year going to slip from the upper middle class to the middle class and probably into the lower middle class. They're going to have to make a lot of changes mentally and emotionally and financially to survive. And you know the biggest mistake they're going to make? The biggest mistake they always make?
Never downscale their life.
They never downscale their life, right? They try to hold on to keep that image. And the first thing that happens is that all the money they did have in the bank that they could have used constructively is gone to pay for a stupid lifestyle, mortgage and everything else they no longer need. And then comes everything else. And then comes the debts to the friends and family that they borrow from. And then from the bank. And then now they're loaded up with debt and they have no job. And now what they have is still going to be lost. Now they're going to lose everything and have all this debt. The very first thing people should do is start lessening their burden of their lifestyle, the cost of it, in case they do get laid off. Then they don't have to worry about who they're going to depend upon. They're depending upon themselves. And if they are laid off, get rid of everything. You don't need it. Start over. Starting over is a whole new and exciting experience. But we don't like to think that something we were taught as children is going to be forever now is tenuous. It's not forever. When I went home to my reunion, my neighborhood was all changed. It's all trashy now. And but when I was growing up, we were taught that things would be forever. Now, 2 people still live in the same homes that their families have lived in forever. But all around them, it's all just ghetto. And I went to see these people. I hadn't seen them in a long time. And I said, how you doing? Oh, you know, the neighborhood's this and that. Well, why don't you move? Well, we can't move. Why can't you? Well, because we've always been here. I tell you, but the world's changing, you know. You used to be in an upper middle class neighborhood, which is now a ghetto. So now you can't go outside in the daytime, you can't go outside at night, you have to get someone to take you to go to the store, to go to the bank. You're a prisoner to this little home here. Is it worth it? Is any square footage worth our emotional health? It's just square footage. I don't care what you make of a house, brick, stone, marble, concrete, tile, it's just square footage and building material. That's all it is. The energy that you have when you're there is what makes it special. But you can put that same energy anywhere. You're the energy, not the house. But we give it a life of its own. We give it power that it shouldn't have. It's an inanimate object, and we make it more powerful in controlling us than we have in our own life. And we indebt ourselves to this bunch of stone and brick and clay, and it's stupid when you think about it. The willingness to let things go and say, I thank you for enjoying it for when I did, but now I'm going on with my life. We have that hard time letting that go because our ego, our belief system, our self-esteem is all attached to it, just like with the relationships. Which risks didn't we take that in retrospect we should have? Did you ever think about that? I should have and I didn't. Should have done something and didn't do it. Because I didn't do it, I missed out on something that would have given me some opportunity. We have to be willing to take some risks, but if we didn't take risks, don't beat yourself about it, let it go. Learn from it and try in a different way. But the next time an opportunity comes, make it or take it. If an opportunity isn't there, go out and make one happen. Go out and make an opportunity. The people who are succeeding today with their lives are making their lives work. The others are waiting for someone to support them in their life. And you see this tremendously. Middle class is waiting for someone to support them and take care of them and make their life all better, make it an Ozzie and Harriet, make it Father Knows Best, make it a safe neighborhood, make, their backyards nice and their flowers grow and their kids all happy and the swings and Disneyland. That's, they're waiting for someone to intervene to make it all nice again. The poor are waiting for someone to help them out of the poorness, and nothing's going to happen. It's not going to happen. It hasn't happened. So a person is going to have to take whatever skills and assets they have, network with others, go out and meet other people, go to groups that have support that you need and strengths you need and insights you need, and make the breaks. You're either going to make the breaks or you're going to be victimized. Yes?
So that's a contradiction to what you said before about freedom. Giving yourself freedom, letting these things go. If you're hassled by someone, if you own too many possessions, all this clutter around you, let it all go.
Right.
On the other hand, you're saying, well, wait a second, you can only let it all go if you're now willing to go out and make something else happen for yourself.
Oh, it's not a contradiction. Let me explain in the context so you see how I'm saying it. I'm suggesting, and you made a good point. I'm glad you made that point. I'm suggesting to be free, you have to be willing to unclutter your life so you have the freedom to see what is there to experience. And I'm also suggesting in that process, don't wait for someone to come and rescue you in this process. Instead, make your freedom happen. I'm not suggesting you make something happen so you can own something else. I'm suggesting you make something happen so you no longer are just a victim of your circumstances. You're not waiting for someone to come and rescue you from bankruptcy, from a bad neighborhood, from a school that you can't communicate with, or whatever it is. Make the breaks. And if you can't make it here, make it someplace else. And get support from people who are in the business or they're in some community way, and they exist everywhere, like with AIDS. Someone down at Hill last week, or week before last, when I was down there giving a lecture, says, well, it's one thing for you to talk about not being able to, to eat right because you can afford to eat right. And I says, no, I have not changed my standard of living in years and years. I live way, way below my financial means. My finances are here. My standard of living is here. But I deprive myself of nothing. I have what makes me happy. And therefore, I can take the money that is extra and work on the projects that I find are important. And I said, now, I eat and spend not a whole lot more money than you do. I sprout my own sprouts. I sprout about 9 different sprouts each day. Cost about 7 cents to start some sprouts. Now, what's more expensive? An iceberg lettuce you're going to buy in a store, or some sprouts, the iceberg lettuce? That head of iceberg lettuce, I can sprout 7 different types of sprouts that are more nutritious, more varied, more variety. Now, there's a house downtown, and it feeds about 1,600 to 1,800 persons with AIDS and other life-threatening diseases a month for free. Organic food, wonderful, wonderful meals. And I said, are you aware of that? The person says, no, I didn't know that. I said, could you imagine how much better you would feel if you had one great meal a day, all you could eat, organic food? Yeah, I'd love that. Well, have you sought it? Well, no. You were waiting for someone to come and pull you out and take you to it. It doesn't work that way. We've got to make the connections and make the effort to try to help ourselves. And that's what I was referring to. Making the connections to make the opportunities, because the opportunities in the world we live in today are not going to come up and knock on your door and say, hey, guess what? We want to feed you organic food today. We want to give you free medical treatment that some doctors are now doing for persons with AIDS. We want to give you emotional support in Tai Chi and Qigong, which an organization is doing here in New York City. There's so many things a person could get for free or very little if they chose to go out and access them to network. But if you're not willing to network, you're not going to know about them. And that's just for a very poor person with AIDS. Now he's got all of his produce for a whole week, a big, gigantic 20-pound bag for $15. Right? Because I suggested he make one phone call, and they did, and it was all delivered every week now. So I said, now, do you see what the helpless mentality has? Helplessness. The mentality that makes some effort, tries to open up some communication, tries different things. At least you have a chance of having something happen. Nothing happens, nothing's going to happen if you don't take some risks and try to get out there and motivate yourself. I'm suggesting every single person in this room, if you really got motivated, if you really wanted a better life, and that doesn't mean more money or more materialism, it means a better life. More time, more freedom to do the things, share the things, be the things that you want to be, then you've got to become resourceful. You've got to look to network, you've got to look to communicate, you've got to look out there from what you feel in here, and there are people and organizations out there willing to give support and direction.
Gary, I'm very interested in continuing something like this in support groups or meetings. I think it's just fabulous what you're doing, and I really can relate to this. And do you know of any groups or meetings or things that are taking place in the city?
Sure. Right here.
Where?
Right here. Howard Robbins has been doing support groups for 16 years. And sometimes with 3 people, sometimes with 6 people. It was because of a support group that Howard and I started that now he is helping people with IV drips of vitamin C who couldn't afford them. He's probably given 7,000 people magnetic and other podiatric and sports care that couldn't have afforded it for free. And that's just a few of the things. Because someone cared enough to say, I've got a need, where can we find a fulfillment for it? I've got a resource, let's combine skills. I'm suggesting going back to the human potential movement of the 1960s. It was never actualized. The human potential movement never, ever went beyond its initial idealistic stage. It was a wonderful concept, but before it could have a chance to really evolve, we got in real quick to the consumerism society. And a lot of different things split off from that. I'm suggesting that in the 1990s, we can begin to put our egos aside, our own constant self-interest aside, and look at what we can share with others to create synergy. You've got that skill, you've got that skill combined. Now what do you got? You got a skill greater than either of you individually. Get small groups together, network, work with each other. And that's how things are going to happen, because you've got to. Bartering is important. You know, I've got a friend of mine that was making $150 an hour and lost his job, didn't make changes, now he's broke, and now he's got obese and he got sick. And I said, you can't find work at $150 an hour? No, I can't find work at $100 an hour. I can't find work at $50. Well, why don't you go out and barter your skills? You want food? Go work at a food co-op. Barter skills. You know computer work, set them up computer systems. So he went in and set up a whole computer system that they really needed. They didn't have. They were so disorganized. In return, now he gets free food. Right? Big headache gone. Organic free food. And what did he give? His time. And his time was bartered. You don't appreciate how much you could do in bartering until you, but you know, it's kind of an ego thing. Well, if I'm always used to being paid, now I got to place a value on my time and energy and effort. And the whole idea of barter is never place the value that it is in the consumer market. Place it on what the other person is exchanging for you. So if someone's giving you something that's worth $5 an hour and your time is worth $50, you have to bring yours down to $5 an hour. There has to be equality in the barter. Otherwise, you're saying, well, I can't barter with you. You don't have anything I need. Oh, really? Well, let's say that you're a house cleaner and you're going to clean someone's house. In return, the other person is a dentist. If I was a dentist and I wanted to barter, I would equate the person cleaning my house as equal to what I'm going to do to fix their teeth. Then you respect each other. That's the whole idea of barter. Mutual equality in what you share, even though there may be different values in your income levels and the skills. And that's how you have to start a barter arrangement. And then suddenly everything gets done. Franco knows a painter, and that painter barters his paintings, and he's got a yacht, cars, free dental care. He has all this stuff, right? All without money. Because
Now he's going to go to a gym for a year, a couple of paintings.
and he went to where? He went to Egypt. Went down the Nile, cruised on the Nile. He and his wife.
Having his car repainted.
His car's repainted.
The body shop.
All he lives off barter, right? And as long as you're doing it within the tax code, and however you want to do that. But he's a smart man, and he lives a very carefree life. It's filled with joy and love and happiness. And he experiences everything. He just experienced the New York City Marathon. He never thought he would do it.
That's what they're doing.
He's very free. He's very free to tell you things about himself that people wouldn't tell you. He's a very good man. Now, can we allow someone to be excessively wealthy at the expense of others being excessively poor? Look at communism. Look at socialism. Look at China. Look at Russia. It does not work. It never did work. Because when they took away all the wealth and all the possessions from the rich and they spread it equally among all the poor, now all you had is a lot of poor. Right? Look at it. Don't be politically correct. Be honest. People went to Russia today, or when they go to Russia, they don't go to see the workers, paradise. No, they go to see the Tsarist Kosello Palace. We don't like what some of the deeds were when people were used and abused in slavery. And that is wrong. But if it weren't for people who had money, we would have nothing. Nothing. There'd be nothing to go see. There'd be nothing to say, look at what we were able to achieve. Look at what we were able to do. That takes the individual who's willing to take the risks, and we give them the rewards. Now, we may consider at some point the rewards excessive, but if they're willing to take the risks and it's their ideas and they're the motivator, then by God, I'm willing to support them. So that's why we have a system of those people who are willing to take the risks and the other who support them in their efforts, and they get equity for that. They can say it's not enough equity and I won't work with you, or it's enough equity and I will work with you. But without that, we wouldn't have any of the major institutions. We wouldn't have any of the institutions of higher education. We wouldn't have any of the great cultural centers. We wouldn't have any of the major foundations. We wouldn't have the Ford Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, the Getty Foundation, the Mellon Foundation. We wouldn't have any museums. You wouldn't have a single museum in America. You wouldn't have a single museum in the world. What would the world be without? With Lincoln Center, we wouldn't have had it. The Metropolitan Museum of Art, we wouldn't have it. You would have no one supporting the art. You'd have no sculpting, music, design, dance, theater. You would have nothing. You would have a proletariat, stupid communist state. This whole idiocy that you take away the money from the rich and you give it to the poor, you do nothing to upgrade the poor, and you do nothing but suppress those people who were innovative enough and are innovative enough to cause change. Now, the idea is that there is no scarcity of wealth. The only scarcity we have is the distribution of our energy towards what we consider essential. And it's amazing no one's ever figured this out. Go to any country in the world. Why do you go? You go to see the beauty of the country. Who makes the country beautiful? Those people who help plan it and build it. Now, sometimes they do it for their own ego. Most people who build monuments build them for their own ego. Well, if it weren't for those egos, we wouldn't have any of the progress we have. There wouldn't be any steel companies, because there wouldn't have been any automobiles. There wouldn't be any ship companies, because there'd be no ships. There'd be no railroad trains. But we don't like to think about that, because then that suddenly means that we're not all equal. But no one's equal. Everything is unique. The difference is that when we don't have, we suddenly resent have. And we shouldn't. We shouldn't look to punish others who have done something we haven't. When I look at how they want to, malign Madonna, I don't consider her particularly a talented person. I don't consider her a great singer or dancer, but I respect her right to make what she does and live her lifestyle. That's her right. Right? I don't want to see her destroy her career or herself. But overnight, we will destroy someone by the opinion we hold of them. And sometimes we destroy people who don't deserve to be destroyed or lose their power in our society. We're very vicarious. I think that's interesting. I think it's interesting to see that if you gave everybody in America all the money they needed, every person, every man, woman, and child, how little would actually change over a 5-year period. In time, you would have the same system reflected. The people would still not save more, because we're not a society that saves. But give another culture that, and if they save 30%, they'd save 30%. We save 2%, we'd still save 2%. The more money you make, the more you're going to spend. Unless you change your ideals, unless you change your perspective, unless you change your principles. And so it's rather ironic that when we want to limit our social vision, who creates the social vision? The people willing to take the greatest risks. So if we overburden them with every regulation, with every bureaucratic nonsense, like in New York City, you don't see many new businesses opening up in New York. You don't see any major things happening in New York, because it's like doing business in New York City, you've got to go up against a gauntlet of bureaucratic nonsense that destroys you. What's the purpose of that? In our own lives, if we feel that there's going to be more hassle making change than not, we frequently won't make change. So what happens to other people taking chances is the same thing that happens to us, except it happens in a much more accelerated and more intense way. But ask yourself, why not try something new, take some chances, and see if you can't be one of those people who create part of a vision that didn't exist for something that enhances the quality of your life and maybe is a legacy for other people to enjoy as well. Whether it's in writing the poem, whether it's in creating a dance movement or a piece of sculpture, whether it's in creating a new form of education or a new curriculum. There are no limitations of ideas that will allow a society to move forward, that will honor the minds and spirits that are not afraid to be the higher form of their own being. Look at Russia today. Look at a car that was built in Russia. Okay? Look at those cars that were built in Yugoslavia. Do you remember the cars? The Yugo? Well, you go someplace with that Yugo, and it's going to break down. And then look at the Japanese car. Look at the French car. Look at the German cars. And some American cars, where a sense of care, a sense of honor went into the work. Where you cared about, you became an extension of the product that you were a part of. Then that had some quality. But when people don't have to risk, when people have everything taken, all risks taken for them away, and they're cared for completely, then you take away the strength of the person. So when it comes back to the idea that all we need is more money, it's not more money we need. We need a whole new definition of life. And lastly, do you go into debt to impress others? Do you buy clothes you can't afford or don't need? Do you wear the clothes that you buy? Or do you wear certain ones and let other ones go? If you do, give them away. Your house, do you go into debt to impress people about the house, the size of the house, how you decorate the house? How much do you spend on the house because you really want that versus what you think it needs to maintain a certain appearance? The furnishings, your car. Think how many times people will buy a car that they don't need, right? They don't need a $30,000 car. They could buy a $13,000 car, but they have a certain image of what it should be to have that car. So they're projecting their image they want to have of themselves. And as a result, advertisers know this. The location of your apartment. Is there any reason that the Upper West Side is so gentrified, so expensive? Yeah, because people have a certain image living there. The other day I was in my health club. It was 11 o'clock at night. I had 2 people from the running group in there. This guy walks in and says, "Gary, can I see you?" I walk over, he says, "No, you know, we have rules in this building." I said, "Yeah? What are your rules?" He says, "Well, you know, you can only have 2 people in here at a time, and there's a certain dress code." I said, "Well, we're wearing shorts and tank tops and tennis shoes and sneakers." I said, "What?" "Well, you know, it's a little kind of Central Park-ish, like, you know, like you're running out there." I said, "No, we're in here working out." He said, "Well, you know, we like things that don't look so down there in the park." I said, "You know, in other words, if Calvin Klein top and, you know, Armani shorts," he says, "Yeah, something like that." I said, "Are you going to have fashion police come and arrest us if we don't dress right?" I could just see it now. Gary Null arrested for not being fashionable enough in the gym. And I asked the guy, I said, "Obviously you really believe in this, and all the yuppies in this building believe in this." I said, "Do you think that's healthy?" And the guy said, "Gary, we moved into this building because of the image that we want to maintain." I said, "Okay." I said, "Fine." So I told my friends that we're going in there later tonight, and we're dressing in tuxes. I'm dressing up in a tuxedo, and yeah, I am. I really am. And I'm going to call him and ask him, "Is this good enough for us to sweat in?" See his reaction. Do you go into debt to impress others with, for instance, your travel? Do you travel where you want to travel, or do you travel where you think it is fashionable, where you can talk about where you've traveled? And your jewelry and other things. When you keep all this in perspective, you realize how many things, large and small, minor and major, we have done which are more to affect an image of a certain standard or class rather than just being happy with who we are, dressing the way we want, living where we want, being with people we like to be with, sharing a relationship that is healthy and happy. And when you put all that together, that's not expensive, and it doesn't take a lot of work, and it doesn't take a lot of time, and it leaves you a lot of free time. That's the end of our session, and I want to thank you all for coming to these last 5 weeks.